Fantastic. The three of us have all watched Looper 2012, the 2012 Rian Johnson movie Looper. We are going to talk about why it should be a game. One second, give me a sec. That's not how I do that. How the fuck do I usually do that? Welcome to This Should Be a Game, a podcast about adaptive media and filtering 90% of your life experiences through tabletop role-playing games. I'm Satah, I use they, them pronouns. You can find me on Bluesky at satahchips.gaygothvibes.online. You can find my website and work generally at gaygothvibes.online. I'm standing here in a field, checking my watch, hanging out, just waiting, and oh, thank goodness, it looks like my co-host Jess is here. Jess, you have about 2 seconds, unfortunately, to deliver where people can find you before something really unfortunate happens.
I'll try and get it out before you take the shot and convince you not to close my loop, which will make more sense in a second. But in the meantime, you can find me on Bluesky as at jessfrom.online. You can find my website at jessfrom.online, and all my games as Jumpgate Games, which is what I am on itch.io. And yeah.
Now, we are very, very blessed and intimidated to be joined by someone who has a much fancier gun than us, which seems to convey a lot about status generally in this world. Aaron, where can people find you?
Yeah, hold on. Let me just twirl my gun around a couple times. Explain to you why this gun is actually way better than... Oh, shit, I dropped it. Sorry. Anyway, you can find me on youtube.com/@aavoigt, where I write video essays about tabletop games, and Bluesky at aavoigt, and I guess Tumblr at Monster Factory Fanfic if you want to see some weird shit, but that's where I am.
All right, fantastic. Today we are starting off our series using the 2012 movie Looper as a jumping point to design a TTRPG. We'll get started with a nice little summary of the film from Jess. Go for it, Jess.
In the year 2044, in the urban sci-fi setting of Kansas City, our protagonist Joe, played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, works as a looper. As the neo-noir voiceover explains, in the year 2074, time travel has been invented, but it's a crime. It's also become very hard to get rid of a body without being traced, so future crime syndicates use illegal time travel tech to send their victims back in time, head bagged and hands bound, where a looper shoots them on arrival and dumps the body. After a brief visit to a club where Joe gets high off of what seems to be something like eye drop ecstasy, we also learn that loopers surviving to 2074 is a problem for their employers. They might get the syndicate caught using time travel. So anyone who makes it that long gets sent back to be killed by their own younger self, along with a massive payday and the end of their job as an assassin, a process referred to as closing the loop. Joe's shitty friend Seth, Paul Dano, comes to him in a panic after chickening out of killing his old self and closing his loop. Apparently, old Seth says a mysterious person called the Rainmaker is taking over all the future syndicates and closing all loops. Seth demands Joe hide him from their boss, Abe, played by This Should Be a Game repeat actor Jeff Daniels, who was sent back from the future to coordinate the loopers. Joe hides Seth in his apartment, but Abe's Gatmen, named for their special revolvers, bring him to meet with the boss, who coerces him to give up Seth's location. They can't kill Seth without causing time problems, so they instead fake a message from young Seth to old Seth by carving a message into young Seth's arm, whose scar tells old Seth where to go, where he's promptly ambushed and killed. When Joe's next Vic arrives, it's old Joe, Bruce Willis, his face uncovered and hands unbound. Old Joe knocks young Joe out and escapes. Young Joe goes back to find Gatmen in his apartment, culminating in him falling 2 stories and blacking out. Suddenly, we're back to the moment before old Joe arrives, but this time he arrives properly bound and Joe successfully kills him. Years start ticking by on screen as Joe moves to Shanghai, burning through his savings and falling back into crime. Shortly before we know he'll be sent back in time to die, he marries a woman, played by Summer Ching, who the movie gives neither voice nor name. They have a few loving years together, but then the syndicate arrives to close Joe's loop. Overpowering his kidnappers, old Joe still sends himself back to 2044, but alters his history by knocking out young Joe and escaping. Young Joe takes a break from hunting his future self to meet up in a diner in an unsteady truce. Old Joe explains that the syndicate killed his wife when they kidnapped him, and he's come back to kill the near-anonymous Rainmaker and stop that from happening. All old Joe has is a birthday and hospital code that translates to the addresses of 3 10-year-olds who might grow up to be the Rainmaker. Before the Joes can work out their differences, Abe's Gatmen arrive, and after a space western shootout, they barely get away. Young Joe with one of those 3 addresses, which he follows to a farm where Sarah, the only named woman, played by Emily Blunt, lives with her young son Sid. Joe offers to stay and protect the family from old Joe's murderous crusade against 10-year-olds, not out of the goodness of his heart, but because he needs to kill old Joe to get out of trouble with Abe. The family hides Joe from his pursuers. One night, after a Gatman visit, Sarah and Joe have sex for some reason, and post-coitally, Sarah reveals that she can do telekinesis. Oh yeah, did I mention that this movie established that some people have weak telekinesis and then doesn't reference it again for an hour? Anyway, Joe wakes up to the Gatman holding Sarah at gunpoint, at which point her 10-year-old Sid explodes the Gatman with his mind. Joe realizes that Sid is destined to become the Rainmaker, and that because he knows it, so now does old Joe, who's been busy murdering 10-year-olds. In the climactic scene, Joe kills Abe's most sopping wet Gatman, Kid Blue, an occasional nuisance and nemesis throughout the movie, and old Joe goes after Sarah and Sid. When old Joe's bullet grazes Sid's cheek, Sarah calms her son before he can get mad and explode everyone. She tells Sid to run and puts herself between old Joe's gun and her kid. Joe, watching, realizes that if old Joe kills Sarah, an orphaned, traumatized Sid, just like Joe's backstory but with explodey mind powers, will grow up to become the Rainmaker. So Joe turns his gun on himself and fires, erasing old Joe's existence instantly, saving Sarah, and we all hope, preventing Sid from becoming the Rainmaker.
Pretty straightforward. I don't think anybody would lose track of any particular note in there. This movie I have seen before, but not in like a decade. I was a big Jogo Lev fan as a teen, and so I was very drawn to this. It was kind of fun getting to watch it again, and a little wild. Aaron, what were your sort of like takeaways from the movie? The high points, the low points, whatever.
High points definitely is like, what if your son turned out to be Mewtwo? That's awesome. Very excited about the ludic applications of that. Low points. Did you all know that there's 2 types of women, which are moms and dead wives?
Yeah.
I couldn't believe that she actually gets like the iconic dead wife shot in like the white sheets in bed, and I wrote down something like, oh, she's getting the dead wife shot but she's not dead, and then like 40 seconds, like not even, it's like 10 seconds later he's like, well, they killed her, and I'm like, shit. Okay,
Yeah.
never mind.
I went to look up the name of the actress so that I could make sure she was properly credited, even though she gets short shrift in the movie, and I was like, surely they named the character. Absolutely not.
Wrong. No.
Old Joe's
And
wife.
that's the thing. Her name's not even technically Summer Ching. It's actually Shu Ching, and she's a hugely important actress in like a ton of like Chinese TV shows. Like, so that they did her real dirty. I will say.
It is so wild that like it's sometimes I think I forget, like I watch enough media that is a little bit more deliberate about some of this stuff, that sometimes when I find myself watching media that will just fridge a silent wife, I'm like, whoa, I forgot. There's a reason that we criticize this as a thing. They will just do it.
Yeah, silent wife and only major character to be a person of color, too. Like, it's wild.
Pretty cool.
Pretty wild.
Yeah. But, they do time travel pretty well in this movie, I think. Like, I am typically very skeptical of time travel narratives. I think they're very difficult to get the stakes right, because, like, you could just be like, never mind, that didn't happen. But, like, sometimes you're like, okay, how do we show that there is, like, narrative significance in time travel. It's like, okay, we're gonna do surgery to you so that way your nose gets cut off in the future, and then you have to start paying attention. It's like, okay, yeah, that's stakes, baby.
There is a moment in this that I remember loving the first time I watched it, and I did still really like it. I think it didn't hit quite as hard, but Bruce Willis just angrily delivering, "We're not going to explain all of this."
It's so funny.
I like it was so good. Like,
it doesn't matter. Like, literally says it doesn't matter.
Like,
Is like the
so
most meta
mad.
narrative turn to the audience. Like,
yeah, is like, it does such a good job of delivering, here's what this feeling should, like, here are the feelings you should be having, and don't think about anything else. And it's like, I'm on board. That's great. Even from the very beginning, I think that this movie does a lot of that fairly well, in a way that I think shows that despite its flaws, of which there are numerous, one thing that this movie is not is self-conscious. I don't think that this movie has any interest in being something that it isn't. And I love that, like, from the very beginning, it starts and you get a voiceover explaining what the premise is so they can just get the fuck into it, which I really admire.
And it's so neo-noir, right? This is such a genre send-up. Like, the first half is your neo-noir and the second half is your Western. And, like, I do love how unabashedly Rian Johnson loves genre fiction and then just, like, paints it with such a loving brush.
Right.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I've only seen 5 Rian Johnson movies, the 3 Knives Out, The Last Jedi, and now this. And, like, in all of them, Johnson does know how to make the audience feel, which is, like, you know, that's kind of the core of storytelling. If you can hit that, you're already there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, as was mentioned in the summary, this movie does do some odd things. I did say, you know, the movie doesn't want to be something that it isn't. It also does very distinctly want to be about 2 things.
Yes.
Mild psychic powers and time travel. And I think it'll be interesting as we get into this to talk about, like, you know, you said, Aaron, you know, the potential implications that you can play within. What if your kid turned out to be Mewtwo? And I'm really curious, as we chat, how we're all going to feel about, like, do we want to try and have both of those elements in this game? Do we want to focus on one or the other? I think all are possible, and I'm just really curious how it's going. I do think there's something that's really funny about adapting this movie. If you bring both, it is so tightly tied to Looper. If you're like, we're doing time travel and there's mild psychic, you're like, okay, this is a Looper. You're doing a Looper. And then if you sort of wander away more into one direction or the other, it can be a little different. But I don't know. Yeah, that is... I do think that I was more drawn to the time travel elements of this movie because they were done so well. I wanted to see more exploration of that. And so a lot of my thinking has been along those lines, but I am not averse at all to bringing it all together as much as we can.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think this game, you know, I've seen you posting about this, Jess, and one thing that you brought up was Riley Rethel's A Long Time Coming. And, like, so I think the main thing that I was thinking of when I was, like, trying to be like, how would you adapt this? And it's like, this game, or this movie has a lot of, you know, action sequences, right? There's several gunfights, you know, there's a lot of brawling, but I don't think it's a tactics game. I don't think it's a trad RPG, right?
No, not at all.
And if we are going to go more in the Long Time Coming, like, at the end of the day, it's you know, 2 guys who are one guy, you know, doing what needs to be done. I do think that is the more, like, we have to go in a more story game mode, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and for those unfamiliar with A Long Time Coming, it's a game about you having, like, a fated duel, but it's not really about the duel. It's about it's about your, like, Javert and, oh, you're gonna catch me now.
Jean
Valjean. It's about your Javert and Jean Valjean being apart for so long and singing songs about each other and then coming back together. You're exploring their time apart and what it means and finding out about their history and stuff like that. And then you do have like one dramatic confrontation, but it's a prompt game where you're asking questions about who are these people to each other. And so, yeah, I got immediately obsessed while watching this with the idea of like, you know, you're going to have this confrontation with your older self, and it's a self-exploration through the other, which I think is one of the most interesting parts of this movie. Is how do you learn about yourself through the other when the other is also a different version of yourself? How do you confront? We are all constantly confronting our younger selves, and we are all constantly envisioning where will we be? And I think there's so much narrative potential in that. But as both Seda pointed out and you pointed out, there's this second movie at the end that is the Emily Blunt Sid plotline. What if your kid was Mewtwo? And like, one of the things that I wrote down is like that part of the movie is way less interesting to me. I was so down in the first half and then a little less at the end. But the interesting thing to me there is the cycle of violence and what it means to break the cycle of violence. He like almost says explicitly when he shoots himself, like, I'm gonna stop perpetuating the cycle of violence, basically. And when we talk about the family, which is I could go on about Marxist critiques of the family for a long time, and so could multiple people here. But one of the interesting things about the family to me is the idea of the cycle of violence and how we pass it on and how we interrupt it. And almost the one bridge that I see, going back to what you were talking about, Aaron, of like, what is this story game and what does it mean to have this like faded like exploration of your feelings about yourself, is that there's so much inevitability in this movie, and then it ends on a moment of saying the cycle is not inevitable. And so playing with both this coming confrontation that perpetuates actually violence against yourself. You have learned to experience violence, and therefore you literally are violent against your future self. And then how do you break that for yourself and for others? There's so much there. There's so much dramatic irony there. And Aaron, you literally did a video on my game Going Rogue, which plays so much in dramatic irony and knowing where you're going. So I actually, as I watched Looper, not really knowing what I was in for, I was so excited to have you on for that particular topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right that like there is something, especially in a lot of duet games, like that when you have a game with the premise where you already know where the end is, right? You know where the like game's climax is going to go. So then building up the context for what that climax is, I think that's really, really juicy to be like, okay, how do we know what's going to happen? How do we reverse engineer a story we care about? And then you can definitely do the thing. I think another touchstone in that is Brandon O'Brien's Soft Shell, where you also have to like, you know, build up a story where you know that there is going to be some sort of final confrontation, but at the end of the day, like maybe if you built up enough points while throughout your playthrough, you can exceed a threshold where like, you know, at a certain number, it's like, okay, the government gets you, right? But if you exceed that threshold, then it's like, hey, you know, medium to high happy ending. So that's, you know, playing with that idea of like maybe the outcome is not determined. Another thing that I was thinking about when I was watching this, I was like, you know what's a game that where you have to establish how it ends initially is Microscope by Ben Robbins. And I wonder if there's anything where it's like, okay, let's start building out the timeline. You know, if we are the characters, like here's how we start, here's how we end, and then start like folding the timeline in towards each other and see where they cross, and then maybe start rearranging the timeline as the narrative keeps going.
I really like that idea, the specific, like the idea of we have these 2 points, let's link them. And I mean, that is generally something that I think that I chase in my game design a lot, which is I'm going to give you some stuff. The game is you make it make sense. Have fun. So that like that really appeals to me, and that's really cool. I think one of the games that I thought of a lot while I was watching is a game called Voyagers that I bring up all of the time, which is a 2-person LARP duet by Margot Gray, where you play in silence and you are 2 versions of the same character from different timelines. There was a diverging thing that happened, and you are communicating only through songs. You're allowed to ask each other questions. You're only allowed to answer them by sending songs, and you play in silence. It was one of the most affecting game experiences I have ever had, and I'm obsessed with it. Just the feeling of sitting on mute, because I played it with a friend on Discord. We were both muted, just communicating through chat and sending each other songs. It was so unique, a feeling that I have never had in any other games, and it was fantastic. And so some form of I'm really into the idea of walking down the path of like 2 or more people playing the same person. We have some stuff that is established. We have our Into the Spider-Verse canon events or whatever, and then we're trying to figure out how to get between them. We're trying to maybe sometimes shift the context of them, so we learned that it wasn't quite what we thought it was. Maybe that's actually something. Maybe if we have established start and end points, maybe we have visuals, but we don't necessarily know what's going on there. And like, you know, we're like, we see 2 people in a room, and one of them pulls out a knife and stabs it into the other person's stomach. And then in the like goofy fun version of this, it's like, we found out that they were doing emergency surgery to save that person's life. You know, something about that is really appealing to me. And that, like, starting with the shell, this like visual without any interiority to it, and coloring it in, adding context, adding motivation, could be fun. And I think that is worth keeping in mind as like a potentially interesting thing.
Something I love about that is that feels so like perfect to the fact that this is a movie podcast in a way that like we don't always meta comment on, because they are a visual medium and they express ideas uniquely because they are a visual medium. And like we use the language of the camera in TTRPGs all the time, right? Like, what does it see? But even when we do that, we're often in a more like almost novelistic mode of, here's what the camera sees, here is what my character is feeling. We're describing the interiority. But something movies can and do is give us just the visual and force us to interpret, especially directors and who are good visual storytellers, which is like a very, very specific skill. And so I think faithful adaptation of a movie like this, it's so cool to imagine, can we replicate the feeling of you have a visual, you do not have context, there was no this montage did not come with dialogue, here's where we start, and the interpretation thereof is both the work the audience does in the movie and the work you do in the game. Adore that.
I'm going to do something which is maybe gauche, which is to plug another podcast on your podcast. But,
please.
Friends at the Table's Media Club Plus often does these screenshot streams where they show the next season of the show they're going to do, and they just show a screenshot to somebody who's never seen it. So they most recently did this with The Sopranos. And I do wonder if we could do something similar, which is like, okay, we're working in a situation where somebody can receive new information by changing the timeline. Their memories get altered, and then those altered memories get passed forward into their future selves. So I wonder if there is a way to do a mechanic where it's like, okay, I've prepared some image, like maybe it's just tarot card pulls, but maybe it is like screenshots from a movie.
Oh my
that's
God.
Like, I'm good. All right, cool. You've triggered this mechanic. Now I'm going to slide over a screenshot that I have in my hand or whatever. I'm going to slide that over to you. It's like, okay, now we're both interpreting this image.
Voyagers, but with movie stills is incredible. What? Oh my God.
I love that. Getting it kind of multimedia style is really, really tickling me. Even it like collage aspects.
Yeah.
Like you can play with magazines, and you can cut certain parts out, and you can present, here's an image that we know we're going to work towards, or an image that happened. Maybe there's even a thing where you have a few of the images, and as you're saying, you're filling in the memories, and maybe you're like putting them in context. Maybe you have 5 of them, and then you're red stringing them together in order or something. And I think the other question I have is how interesting it is to lean into the sort of like weird criminal secret society thing, because that is fun. And one of the things, we're rapid firing game references in this, which I love. It's one of my favorite things about talking about games on this podcast. But one of the things that I thought about during the intro was Sam Donowald's Band-Aids and Bullet Holes, which I haven't played as of recording, but I did watch people play at Breakout. And one of the things that game does is it starts with sort of or very early on, there's kind of a ritualistic reading of the oaths of your order of weird assassins that everyone does. Everyone goes popcorn style, reads a line. And Sam talked about how it's just a very effective way for getting everybody sort of into the world and establishing, kind of like I talked about with how much I love that this movie just says, here's the situation, deal with it. There's something I really love about doing some of that in this game and just like forcing that buy-in really quickly. And the Weird Secret Order of Criminals is an easy way to do that because they are the type who have rules. So I don't know. I think that there are a lot of I don't think that this has to be locked down to a group of people who are doing weird time travel crimes. I'm actually curious about both of your thoughts on that. Is that a specific thing that is appealing to Chase, or is that sort of besides the point in what's most interesting here?
I'm thinking about one of the first things in my game. I have the high ground, which also has a sort of determined ending of a fated duel. One of the first things I have people do is pick their genre, because the game doesn't mandate a genre. It instead says, this is the structure. You are doing a scene where two people have a fated showdown and are bantering beforehand. It is the meta-narrative structure that is determined, not the genre. And so when we talk about the idea of taking these stills and interpreting them and not knowing the context, and we have a bit of inbuilt genre of this is time travel, right? So that gives us something. But I think it's a sort of choice we would be making in the idea that we pursue. Are we locking to genre, which this movie does deploy to great effect, right? It's very being a neo-noir and then being a Western. Or are we not locking to genre and we're trying to make these generalizable time travel mechanics so that you can be doing Groundhog Day or Looper or Tenet or Happy Death Day or whatever else you're doing, and the person is picking at the table and we have to nail mechanics that successfully genericize what allows people to pick a genre and go for it.
I think I guess my tendency is always to narrow scope, just because I know how y'all game designers are. Yeah. And I want to keep you all safe and not losing your minds. So yeah, I think it is useful as a game design technique to be like, hey, this is the genre we're in. Please do not stray from this, otherwise it'll feel weird. But yeah, I do like the idea of just being like, all right, let's figure out what this is about and what we should all be feeling, going forward.
I guess there's also one of the things I'm thinking, if we have these visuals that we're connecting, is that the other thing that would be really great to explore here is who we are as players. Because there is the idea that we're characters, whether that means we're weird time travel assassins or people who are just somehow caught in some other time loop situation for different non-professional reasons or whatever. There's also the idea that we are essentially time travel control room, and that we have these visuals and we are for in some way we are playing the people whose job it is to be like, no, you can't go to the third floor, you're already on the third floor, so if you go up to the third floor you will see yourself and you don't know yet that you can time travel, so that will not work, sort of a air traffic control for time travelers. Which I think there are so many different directions. One of the reasons that appeals to me in this moment is because it feels like it fits into the this is going to be a really stupid sentence, I can already tell. It changes the way that you relate to the figures in whatever images you're using. There is I'm in this, me, I'm in this picture and I like it, or I don't like it, I don't know. But then the being the sort of time travel traffic control, is in some ways a slightly more approachable relationship to the idea that you're looking at these screenshots, because you're like, yeah, I'm an observer. I'm not in it, you know?
One of the things we love to do in this podcast is make an asymmetric GM-less game. And I'm thinking about, Seda, correct me if I get this wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is true of this game. I'm thinking about Jeff Stormer's Anyone Can Wear the Mask, and how you have the hero, the villain, and the city, and those are the three players. And I was thinking about this actually during the movie, where I was like, you have young self, you have old self, and you have the big players in the background. Rainmaker, Abe, the Syndicates, Kid Blue, but I don't like his character, so ignore him. Like, I was just fascinated by, like, there are these people pulling strings in the background, and like, that could be a GM role, but I see it as different than a GM role in that you are not the circumstantial factors affecting these people. You are the people doing this. You're a little more inside the story. And maybe this goes too far outside, but also, like, setting aside you are Rainmaker, you are Abe, there's the idea of you are time travel control, right? So two people are in it and one person is not, and they are communicating with these people in some way. That kind of takes us in a different direction, but I just wanted to pitch that because it was coming up for me so much during the movie.
I think that's really interesting, and I also have to confess something, which is that I forgot games can have GMs.
That is the most story game pilled thing I've ever heard.
It's so, because this would be way too long to get into, but I have increasingly, like, not felt super connected to the culture of story games. But I also, when you were like, we love to make a GM-less game, I was like, as opposed to, like, I had a moment where I was like, what do you mean?
I wish I was you.
But, like,
XKCD comic, everyone knows The Quiet Year and blank, but
one of the things that I struggle with in a lot of GM-less games is not having those defined roles can be more difficult, and one of the things that's great about giving everybody more specific control over certain aspects of the world is that it narrows your playing field in a way that I think is helpful for everyone involved. And so that is very appealing to me. I really like that idea. And is it, in that idea, as you said it there, were you picturing it as, like, there's somebody who's in time travel control and then there is a younger version and an older version and they're communicating to both?
I was curious about that too. Like, what is the relationship? Like, I don't think I had a picture of that. And so I was a little curious what was most interesting to you all. Because, like, they could be working with one. They could be at odds with both. They're manipulating this situation in ways that the other people aren't wanting to be manipulated. What's most fun? What's most interesting?
It might be, I think the most, not boring, but pat read is to be like, okay, the time travel control is the writer's room, it's the authors, and they're trying to nudge the characters towards the story they want to build, and that's fine. It's completely fine to do. But I do think, Seda, you're getting at something more interesting, which is like, yeah, what if we do want these two figures who are opposed to, like, how do we both share the responsibility for crafting that narrative, but also, like, make these two billiards balls, like, kind of ping pong around without us having, like, we can strike the ball, but, like, after that, where they bounce, I don't know. And I think maybe it's like, okay, what if we inject a flashback into young Joseph Gordon-Levitt and then see what that does to Bruce Willis, right? And maybe vice versa.
Oh, that's really interesting. Just the idea of a flashback mechanic that, like, essentially, if people are playing the same character, they can sort of use to trigger a shared memory to like help define who that character is. Like, they meet and they need to communicate about something, and you can say, like, flashback to some, and you talk out, like, here's something that we know exists in our shared history. That's interesting.
I'm thinking now about another 3-player game with lots of 2-person scenes, which is Mobile Frame Zero Firebands, where you have like 20 mini games and you're picking which ones to play with the other 2 or 3 characters to flesh out a certain idea. I'm also thinking about Alex Roberts' game name.
For the Queen?
No, Duet.
Star-Crossed?
I'm thinking about Alex Roberts' Star-Crossed, where like you're forbidden lovers and you have the sort of outcome structure you were talking about earlier, Aaron, and you have very specific rules about like who can establish a scene, what does it look like to establish a scene, how can you talk in that scene, when does the scene end, all very mandated by the game. And the reason these are coming up for me so much is because, Seda, you mentioned the idea of like pitching scenes. We're also back at Fiasco here, where you're like, pick a detail, pick some characters, one person can define, the other person can end. We have these still frame ideas. And what if the way that play is structured is you go, I've picked a still frame. I will pick someone else in this game. I will give them this still frame, and they choose how to interpret it to establish new fiction. And so you're sort of Fiasco, Star-Crossed, Mobile Frame Zero, Firebrand style, someone picks, this is the basis. And then someone who isn't that person goes, this is the meaning. And it gets to be in fiction a little too, because when the young self does it for the old self, they're doing something that the old self then has to go, how do I reckon with it? And when the time travel control does it, they are manipulating the situation to put someone in a situation where the events on frame happen, and they have to go, I did this to your life. What did that cause for you? I don't know if it ever goes from young self, old self to time travel control. I don't know if it's more asymmetric in that way, but like I immediately see how it goes between young and old and between time travel control and the other 2. And maybe there is an asymmetric flow to this. I don't know. That's my jumping off point for you all.
I think that I was also thinking a lot about Firebrands. And one of the specific reasons that I think that's a great focus point is because of Firebrand's focus on factions.
Oh, absolutely.
And the other thing I want to bring up is that Firebrands is actually for 3 to 6 players or something like that. It just has 3 factions, which I like because this is sort of a meta level podcast thing, but we've pretty recently done a 3-person, you have very specific roles and ways you can communicate with each other game. And I think that there is something interesting there, but I feel like I am more curious about exploring something that is a little bit less structured.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean throwing out the like scene setting or anything, but it does mean something that is maybe a little more open and has a little bit more flexibility in the roles of like what you can be. And I think that bringing Firebrand stuff in where everyone has a faction is a really easy way to do that. And
that's more like Fiasco than Star-Crossed, right? Is like pick a detail that you share with one person, jump in. If other characters want to come in, they can. I absolutely see how to move in that direction.
Factions was actually a thing that I wanted to see what your all's thoughts were, because like, what are the factions in this movie? Well, you have the Loopers, you have the Gatmen, you have future gangsters, and then I guess you just have TKs ? Like,
yeah.
So yeah, I'm interested in what you think, how we could develop the idea of factions into making this less formulaic.
Yeah, I wonder. There is like, I mean, by essence of it being a time travel concept, you can get goofy with it and say there's the past, the present, and the future. You could say there are 2 different organizations or 2 or 3 different organizations who want to use time travel in different ways. There's something that would be really off kilter, which is there's a scientific method of time travel and there's a magical method of time travel, and people have different relationships to it for that. I think in the movie, it's so focused on the Loopers that it feels like it's about, there are multiple factions inside of that, right? There are the Loopers. I think the Gatmen are a great example. There's even sort of a little bit of just a middle management versus field team kind of thing going on. So there's sort of like, I think you can split it when we're looking at factions. We really can go in like all dimensions, which is there's time we can go for like a horizontal split where it's 3 different groups or however many different groups, or we can go with, I guess, a vertical split is what I'm saying it would be, where it's like the people at the top, the people at the bottom, and that kind of thing. And then there's the TKs, and then just sort of people, the which does kind of bring me back a little bit to anyone can wear the mask, with the hero, the villain, and the city as just like everyday people and that kind of thing. That's definitely possible.
Something I wrote down is that there are a few times the movie really highlights a quote that I felt was such like literally a like story game, prompt game, character building exercise built into the movie. I cleaned you up and put a gun in your hand. I gave you something that was yours. What would you sacrifice for what's mine? These prompts and questions and how characters respond to them are like so character defining. And I almost start to wonder, like, do we define the factions, or do we give prompts and your prompts force you to define the faction? We give a motivation and then you go, what person within this narrative, if this is, if the loopers are people who were given something that was yours, what does that mean for who your faction is? Maybe there's not enough there, but just like it was such a strong note that I took that I wanted to play with it in this context.
I wonder if we could go further with that and be like, okay, yeah, everybody gets a quote that is their motivation going forward, and then like at a certain point in the game, you pass that information on to your future self, and then they realize that's the context that's informing you, and then you have to go meet in a diner and call them a fucking child.
Okay, this is going pretty far afield here. Are old selves not in the beginning of the game?
Ooh.
Are you starting out playing someone in the past/present, and then as the game goes, you have to take on an old role, whether yours or someone else's. You expand to more than one character or something like that. Because that's the structure of the movie, actually. Like, at the very beginning, old Joe isn't a character until part of the way through. And so, like, are you starting by establishing... That loses a little bit of the where we started this conversation of, like, going from both ends and then coming together. Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe the process of setting up and exploring starts with young selves, and then... You pass it to someone to be like, now tell me where this goes, and let's figure out the center.
I think even just from sort of a logistical standpoint, that's really strong, because it cuts out some of the potential awkwardness of we are now both playing the same character who we don't really know yet.
Yeah.
And so giving people a little bit of time to play their ragtag, if as an example, if this game is you are a crew, you are a time travel murder or whatever fixer crew, and we're seeing you all when you're young and getting started, maybe we're leaning into a little bit of the montage feeling of it, where we're like, year one, let's see you all, let's like establish your characters, let's learn about each other, let's learn about our backstories, all that kind of thing. And then there is a trigger point of something, whether it's like rounds or there's points involved and you've gotten enough points, or you roll something, or, and I like the idea that it's a little bit different for every character. And maybe it's even as easy as like somebody feels that they now understand your character well enough to play an older version, and they trigger like, I'm bringing in the older version of you at this moment because I think I just got it. I think I know what you're going for. I've noticed that when you're playing this character, you have a very specific little fidget, and so I'm just going to bring that in. I'm going to do that kind of thing. I think I can do the voice you're doing.
I love that, and something I'm thinking about is that a big game design lesson that I learned iterating on Going Rogue for 5 years, that is basically what you're describing there, that I think also your consulting on it helped me piece together, is don't incept your characters before you know them. And what does that mean? A new tip that'll be in the new edition that is not in the previous edition is, it's a spy game. it's so tempting to start out in cover. If you're in media res, you're in cover as different fake people. It's so hard. Every game that does that goes much more poorly than it has to, because you don't know who you are. Being a fake version of who you are before you know who you are is incredibly difficult. And so, like, the idea of don't try to be an imitation, an inception, a version of you until you know you, I think is like, that was a hard won lesson with going rogue that I want to see us avoid that pit trap due to that experience. And so I love that you start as the younger self and then someone, and it sets up that oppositional element. Something that is so key to the movie is your young self thinks they know how the world works, thinks they know, because and like thematically, like when you are 20, you think you understand where you are going. And then Bruce Willis comes in and is like, kid, you don't know shit about you or anything else. Which, like, real sorry. And the idea of you start establishing your character, you start going, this is true. And then someone goes, now I know what you think is true. Actually, this is who you turn out to be. Fuck you. I think imitates the themes of the movie in a ludonarrative way, where someone establishes their character and then you get to go, that's not what life actually teaches you.
A game I just thought of that is going to actually, I guess, have me sort of advocating for a GM role is, I don't remember what it's called. It's a board game where you're a ghost and there's a bunch of like really beautiful pieces of art that you are giving to people, and they are like interpreting the art.
I've heard of this.
And the idea behind, I think that you're maybe helping to solve your own murder. And otherwise you are silent. You're not allowed to communicate, which apparently I've learned through discussions on this podcast. I really love telling people how they're allowed to talk to other people at the table. But like, if
Mysterium?
we have
talking, ghost stories, ghost letters?
Mysterium, I think is right.
That sounds right.
Yeah, it's like multiple people are trying to...
They're mediums, right?
I think that's right.
Yes, yeah.
And they're
definitely...
the ghost type person isn't allowed to communicate. They're only allowed to give abstract images that then they try to like interpret, and they're the kind of thing where, you know, they have each little painting has like 50 different elements, so you can say like, well, the sky is yellow, and so I think they're trying to communicate that their gold was stolen, and someone else can be like, well, no, the main thing in this is a tree, and so clearly they're trying to communicate that, you know, they died in the woodshed or whatever kind of thing. And maybe folding some of these things in together, if we have a bunch of players who are playing these at the beginning upstart, you know, time travel professionals, and then we have somebody who is guiding that by giving them sort of the screenshots kind of thing, and just having that like, the sort of image that I have of an effective moment in this game is like two people are, maybe they're doling out missions or something, because we have our players like chatting and arguing and blustering and doing just character establishment type stuff, and then the person comes in and just silently puts an image in front of them, and then they have to like hop in to work and like make it happen in some way, you know, like hop into the context filling portion of it. I don't know, there's a lot of stuff in there that would need connective tissue to work, but that's the vague vibe that I'm leaning towards.
Does the GM role type person play all the older selves?
I think no. Partially because I'm really interested in sharing that, and also just as a general rule, I like the idea of splitting up character NPC sharing, and I also like the idea of there being able to be more than one of them in a scene.
Oh, true,
but
true.
I could certainly be convinced otherwise, but that's just sort of my first instinct.
What I want to puzzle through here, and we maybe don't have to get this concrete, is like the interpretation of these frames, they can have different meaning. A frame can be in the way the movie is structured. The most common use of a visual frame without context is showing the audience something that happens to an older self without understanding what that means. And the person who is doing the interpretation, functionally in the movie, like meta-narratively, it is Bruce Willis's old Joe who provides context to that image.
Mm-hmm.
Then on the flip side, a young self sends information to an old self by experiencing life, and it is the scenes with the young self that give that meaning. There's something I'm trying to get to here, and I'm not quite there. When we talk about this separate person doling out missions and potentially giving out frames, I'm a little curious about trying to define why are they setting the existence of these frames, the context of these frames, and what does that mean in the narrative? Or even beginning to say, like, is that not their role? Because what Abe and the Rainmaker and all these other figures do, when you talk about doling out missions, they are the pressure cooker. They are the things that pit these characters against each other. They are the vice that keeps you in the cycle of violence going way, way back. And so are the frames going back and forth between players, quote unquote, and the GME role is putting those players, it is preventing them from getting on the same page. It is manipulating events in order to pit them against each other. It is putting pressure so that it drives their stories towards conflict. And that's like a little different, because usually the GM role, the GM is supplying the conflict and the players are working together to overcome the conflict supplied for the GM. What if the role of the GM-ish person is saying, I am going to create conflict between you that you have to resolve with each other? I think it's an interesting, like, shake up to the GM role, but maybe very difficult to nail.
Maybe there could be a secret role aspect to it, where it's like the GM knows what the character's secret mission is, and they have to stop them from achieving it.
Oh my god, I'm a huge, I don't play hidden role games, but if it's not competitive and is rather like a source of drama, the idea of the GM just like sliding an image or a piece of paper with a note to an older young player and going, you learn this, your older or younger self doesn't know this yet, deal with it. And then the older or younger selves having to like kind of puzzle out, what did they just learn? How does that affect this? What's going on? Is so fascinating to me. Like, oh my god, the idea that like there's someone who is doling out prompts that are not public to the table, and then the person who receives them has to start interpreting, and like the other people at the table get that information at a remove. They don't see what the GM. What if it's not even okay? This is going far afield. I'm just so excited by what you said, Aaron. What if the still frames aren't what's being passed? The GME role passes you like a word prompt or a sentence prompt, and then the old self describes aloud a still frame based on the prompt that the GM gives them. And so like they get a bit of story or they get a bit of starting point, and then they go, here is a still frame of your future based on that prompt. And then the young self goes, here is that what that means for the rest of my life. And so we get this little chain of it's a telephone game, right? Like sentence, still frame, meaning. And like I love that.
I do think it also allows for the opportunity to be like, okay, you can communicate directly with your future self once, but it does involve a knife. And like that's like, okay, I need to be very clear right now. I'm going to pull out my one move, and all right, we can this is how we know it's go time.
I think that I don't understand most of what you just said. I think I'm missing some like connective tissue of like who they are, what they're trying to do, who's playing what, that kind of thing. I think I missed some core information.
Yeah, and I think one of the difficult things here is I'm having people really wearing a lot of hats at once, like being in and out in what I'm envisioning here. And I think, Seda, one of the things you constantly do for me when I bring you a game idea is go, how do you clean this up and make it like clear and coherent? And so I will be very excited and grateful to have you doing that here. Which, like, I really want to go back to turning this into a game of telephone, which is a little bit of what a game like Voyagers is doing, but like what happens when you have more than 2 players in a game of telephone. And let me give an example to illustrate what I'm imagining, which is the young players have been doing their world building. That's maybe sort of a character creation or setup phase. Someone jumps in as an old character, and then the GME role writes on a piece of paper. I mean, in Looper, what they write on a piece of paper is, I kill your wife, or like a crime syndicate kills your wife, but they write like whatever, like the crime syndicate send you to prison, or like your dream of moving to this place doesn't work out. And they write that on a piece of paper, and they give it to the old player. And the old player looks at it and goes, you see a moment of a gavel being struck with me looking on morosely from behind that gavel. And then the young player goes, shit, that's where I go? Well, obviously I get myself into some real trouble, don't I? And that means I'm doing this. And so it's these layers of interpretation where the GM role provides the vice, the prison, the dead wife, the whatever. Obviously we're not doing the dead wife. And then the older player supplies the out of context image, and then the younger player interprets. There is, pulling back to what I was saying about who actually defines what happens to the older person, which is Bruce Willis. The GM gives you go to prison to the younger player, and the younger player describes a still frame in their future, and the older player contextualizes it and gives it actual meaning. So what direction that goes in is hard to say. But does that example clarify what I'm aiming at, even if I'm not quite getting there?
I think it does. And I think that then my question becomes sort of a matter of expansion, which is, where does that go? Is that the entire game? I would probably argue for a rotating role if that is the structure, because I don't know how fun it would be to always be the person who will never be right about what happened because you're only generating the first prompt kind of thing. I think I also would be missing the idea of being able to be wrong and what the conflict of that means. Like, I would think that I would want a consequence for if you misinterpret something or if the things aren't quite aligned. And then my question would be, I don't remember if I already said this, what the rest of the game is. Is that just the game? Is the game you sit down and you do these prompts? It sort of like, it feels a little bit like a party game style thing, or is that like one section of a game that then has other stuff going on in it? And I think that's the questions. Yeah, I think that's it for what I would have about that specific setup.
I wonder if maybe to help clarify that, we could borrow from Takuma Okada's A Knife to Your Throat and be like, okay, here is a series of like scenes where we want to end up here, and the possibility for being wrong is, and it's like, okay, we both know we end up here, but in the reasons we end up here, where that's where the misinterpretation can happen. It's like, okay, maybe Act 1 we need to reach this scene where it's like we are at a diner, and then Act 2, we need to reach the scene we are confronting each other inside a cane field, and like the climactic moment of each act, where you can shuffle around characters and do that rotating cast bit, is like, okay, why do we end up here, and maybe like that can tie into the screenshot aspect.
Yeah. Is there something in what you're saying about like misinterpretation and like the line that runs, Aaron? I'm thinking about whether there's something in your fate is met on the path to avoid it, which is like another classic story beat. The idea of the young person bucking against, like, I don't want that future. Here's what I do to dodge it. And then the older player going, and here's why that doesn't work, and we end up at this image anyway. So, like, the response the young player has to the image is to go, well, I'm gonna stop that from happening by doing this. And then the older player goes, here's how that doesn't work out for you, buddy. And structurally, Sadie, I think you had a great point about, like, it not being super fun to be stuck in one of those roles. And so I do really like the idea of a sort of rotating seat game where you're sort of passing left. Who generates the prompt? Who is the young self? Who is the old self? And maybe you're the same young self every time. You're the same old self every time, which maybe you pick that midway through the game. You assign that halfway through the game. But the idea of like, it's a game for 3+ players where each of these roles passes left as you play is a possibility for supply the prompt to the young player. The young player provides a visual. The old player says, this is what happens. The young player says, this is how I dodge that fate. Okay, as I draw this out, what if it goes, it ping-pongs? Prompt from GM, rotating GM. Image from young self. Interpretation of image from old self. How I try to dodge that from young self. And then back to the GM role to say, here's why it didn't work.
I think that that's fun. I do think that that's really fun. I continue to not feel that it's a whole game.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I realize I'm pushing up against is, despite, as we've established in this very episode, being quite story game aligned, there are certain aspects of a lot of story game culture that I struggle with, one of which is I am really picky when it comes to knowing how a story is going to end being satisfying to me.
Mm-hmm.
I really like it when it is a game telling a very specific story, such as It's Been a Long Time Coming, or It's Been a Long, Long Time, or Going Rogue. But this is a thing that we had to handle as a group in our Galactic game, Jess, which was that you and I think also the other two people who we were playing with had a lot of instincts to be like, I want to set up a scene where this happens.
And
I
you
would
wanted
be like,
to play to find out.
Yeah, and I would be like, well, we already know what's going to happen. Why would we do that? Can we hop into a scene and then react to it? And so I think that one of the things that I'm missing here in the idea, as you describe it, is that I'm missing the opportunity to have consequences, to explore those consequences, and also to interact in character with other people.
Oh, yeah.
And
there's like
one of the things that you moved away from was multiple characters in this idea. And so I think that I like the idea of this as sort of like we said, at whatever point, like bringing up the idea of like a flashback mechanic or whatever. I think that sort of like returning to a little bit earlier in the conversation when we were talking about just like having these images that we try to string together and that kind of thing. I think leaning a little bit more into that as a broad structural thing, and maybe having it be, maybe it's a mini game. Maybe we're making another fucking game with 1,000 mini games. Maybe this is what we do. But maybe it's the kind of thing where it's like you have the option. You can connect these two images. In order to do that, you enter your little Kingdom Hearts jelly ship connecting tissue I've been watching my roommate play Kingdom Hearts, so it's the only way that I can think of two things connecting to each other. And now you are playing you and your older self struggling for control over this particular visual kind of thing, and just have a little bit more going on outside of that.
So what I'm going to go back to Fiasco.
Many such cases. Me every day.
Yeah. In Fiasco, you roll on a d6 table and you have like a location or an item or something that you share with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And then you say, I will set a scene revolving around this. No? Am I misremembering?
That might be true in Card Fiasco. It's not true in Classic Fiasco. They're just there as prompts. You don't have to evoke a specific thing. Oh,
okay. I might be misremembering. Well, to borrow from my imagination of maybe Card Fiasco, rather than provide sentence, provide image, interpret, and those are all separately happening, it's a little more, there's a scene ongoing and you insert that detail into the scene, or that is just a framing mechanic for a scene. There was a Rascal article about Jason Morningstar and framing mechanics for scenes recently, and it's provide a sentence, young self provides a visual, and then you go, okay, cool, what scene does this evoke for us? We know that the topic of this scene relates to this visual. Let's find through play and through role play where we are together in a room. Let's find the meaning in an exploratory play to find out way. I get to give you that visual. And one thing that is true in Fiasco is one person sets the scene and the other person chooses how to end it. And then the other people determine, was that good or bad for you?
Basically.
Yes. You can flip that. If you don't set the scene, you determine if it goes good or bad for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. The idea of something else you talked about with GM-less games and some of the difficult things is like defining who has power over what parts of the story.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of when you go into a scene, someone has a little more power over some aspect of it. Like either one person has power over framing and the other person has a little more power over interpretation or vice versa. But either way, you're not doing it wholly separately. You're doing it through role play emergently.
Totally. I think that is a really good way to develop that specific thing. I think that I am curious about just backing away from that idea for now.
Yeah, I'm very
because
fixated.
I think that you want to like really focus on making sure that it works, but I'm not feeling like there's a context to put it in.
There
yet.
is no larger game structure. You're totally right there.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I think that is ages back. Aaron, you said you were trying to define the factions, and you offered a couple suggestions. Did you have like an idea of what is like what you would want to see played out there? Like, is it everyone's in the same organization? Is it multiple organizations?
Yeah, I think the idea that I was hoping to come around, I guess I was struggling with factions. You know, it's difficult to find them beyond the Gatmen and the Loopers, but I wonder if there is any juice in just being like, what if Mewtwo is your kid, and how do you keep Kid Mewtwo safe? I don't know if that will provide a different level of structure that we can go around, but like I like the idea that like, there's a character in here that nobody can control and they might turn you into mulch.
Oh, that's interesting.
MacGuffin?
To sort of like to make Kid Mewtwo, make your Kid Mewtwo the sort of like pin that the whole thing rotates around, I think is really a really strong instinct for helping to ground this in like, yeah, this is what you're doing. There is like a person who is important in some way, and you are doing a lot of like weird time travel shenanigans to make sure that, and this can go to several different extremes. This could be a like high slapstick game where you're like, if the kid gets angry, he will explode someone's head. How do we use time travel to make sure that this kid doesn't get angry? You know,
I'm always asking this.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, that's we're getting into triangle agency causality chains when it comes to that, which I think we will kind of inevitably have to in a lot of ways. But I love that idea of having at least one character that is like the reason for the mission. And that is like I'm having that like, ooh, things just clicked into place and opened for me, because that like the way that you presented that showed me how you can tie those two things together without it feeling as separate as it does in the movie, which is great. That's exactly the kind of thing that we want to be able to find. And I'm really, really interested in that. And one of the things that's cool about it, including that, is it does open us up to allow our characters to have those mild psychic abilities, which are fun. They just don't play into like the movie except in very, very specific ways. And one of the things I like about that is it could give us a reason for why these people time travel. They could have latent psychic abilities that allows them to connect to the time stream, and therefore they are like, you get recruited into secret time travel government agency because somebody noticed that you were like way too good at catching stuff when it fell. And that is your like small superpower that shows you have this latent psychic ability, and therefore you are able to be trained to do this specific type of time travel. And normally you have your little day job that you're doing and you're fixing silly stuff, but also, there was a big crisis and we have somebody who is a future dropout of the program because their powers are too strong, and your job is to help control them and make them not explode everybody's head or whatever it is. That's cool and exciting to me.
Kid Mewtwo is my space western cowboy name.
Yeah.
But no, I completely agree. That gives the interlinked structure that is so interesting, and like provides the narrative through line. I'm often one who's not huge on putting kids in games, just not what I often want to play. And so you started to talk about like maybe it's someone who's like connected to the project and drops out or whatever. I want to forward a piece of another deeply problematic piece of media, but like a River Tam like figure of someone who has like been subjected to a weapons program like meddling and stuff like that, and psychic ability, and like
that's true.
They have become a like to me the idea of that character in the movie, that character is sympathetic because they are a child. And they get to use our society's, like, play into the inherent sympathies of a child. I am interested in what about a character who has the inherent sympathy of being a victim of systemic abuse at the hands of the military-industrial complex. And,
Yeah, I think that that's really possible. For me, part of what we're talking about here comes down to safety stuff, where, like, I also would, like, except in very specific circumstances. I'm not a huge fan of child violence in my games. And so, like, but that is something that you do just kind of have to have on the safety sheet for time travel. Like, are you allowed to go back and kill a kid? Like, totally. That is, because that is a fucking classic time travel thing. And I think that first of all, we don't necessarily have to set up this person as somebody who is inherently sympathetic. They can just be a villain. But more than that, we can let people build their own humanity into this person. I think that we don't necessarily, if this is what's going on, I think that we don't necessarily have to lean into like, ooh, this person's going to do bad things, but they have circumstances. I think that we can sort of like generally trust tables to say, well, I have a complex feeling about killing someone at all. And if they don't have that particular thing, if they are just like, okay, yeah, cool, whatever, we kill that person, that's fine, and they might not be swayed anyway by us saying, but they have sad circumstances. And the other thing I want to say here is just that one of the reasons I'm leaning away from that a little bit is that I don't find a lot of joy in designing games that have certain really intense, explicit, emotional beats in them, because it isn't what I'm looking for in games. And so I just, I think that is a worthy theme to explore and could be really powerful. I'm not super interested in digging into it in this specific context because I don't know that I love the idea of talking out what that would mean. You know what I mean?
That inspires me to say, like, what if you back out meta-narratively and ask, what are the necessities for this character to play that role in this story? Because that sort of, like, it doesn't necessarily need to be sympathetic to play all the roles in the story, and it doesn't need to be like a victim of violence. The things, to me, I would actually be curious to hear if you all have different feelings on what would be necessary. But the questions that stand out to me that we could then pose to the table is, why is this person in danger? And why is this person important? Right? Is like, they in some way need your help.
Mm-hmm.
And you in some way need them. Why and why? And if the
Sure.
table says because they're important to the future and because they're a child, that's why. And if it's because if we don't do something, that they will commit a bunch of slapstick violence, and yeah, they can then really broadly define those as long as they fit within the bounds of the character creation questions that are about playing a meta-narrative role. And Aaron, I think a thing you do really well in your videos is when you're like taking apart a game system and asking, like, why does this mechanic have to be there to serve a theme? And I know that's usually a little more game, but I'm when we're looking at this movie in order to turn it into a game, I'm curious, like, you were the first one to bring up Kid Mewtwo. What do you think has to be true about a Kid Mewtwo character to play that role? Is a question I'm really interested in your thoughts on.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of nailed it originally, Jess, which is like, yeah, nobody wants to watch a kid get exploded. That doesn't feel good. But, like, you know, they build up Sid in the movie by making him, you know, like a little super genius, and he makes the little croaky frog thing with Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and that's all well and good. But yeah, I wonder if we are going to try to stray away from, like, kids stuff and come down to, like, what makes a sympathetic character that we want to hold and protect and save from Bruce Willis. I wonder if we could go a slightly goofier route and is like, what if Kid Blue is that character and he's such a fuck up that Bruce Willis comes back to kill him, and it's like, no, we have to give him time to not be a fuck up. Like, I don't know. That's kind of that's probably not like a critical part of the story, but, like, it's an option on a table that's like, oh no, someone's gonna Three Stooges themselves into a nuclear reactor and we have to stop them. But yeah, I mean, you know, I to answer your question, Jess, it is just like, you have I don't know, this is not a very good answer, but I think it's just like, you have to be sympathetic to somebody who is experiencing circumstances outside of their control, and maybe they're cute.
That immediately puts me in the mind of a prompt list for character creation. Gotta love a good prompt list. Like a pick list, where it's like, why does this character need help? Vulnerable, incompetent, blank. You select one of those, and selecting that sets the tone for your game. And then, what can this character do for you? Blank, blank, blank. And so you as long as it's a little less open-ended than just like this question generally, it's instead looking at what are characters in this movie and how do they become necessary or become obstacles, and then turning that into a very simple pick list. And then we get a little bit of the satah connecting and interpretation and elements of like, okay, we have someone who is incompetent plus powerful. How do we have to deal with them? We have someone who is vulnerable but committed. And again, yeah, so those interpretations provide the thing that the story centers around.
The other thing that I think is sort of an easy thing to lean on is just making sure that characters have connections to this character. That is one of the things that's happening is we care, the movie cares about the kid who Joseph Gordon-Levitt spends time with. The other kids are it's very sad that those presumably blonde 10-year-olds are, why do they all have to look the same? We don't know how Rainmaker looks. Whatever, it's fine. Like, we care about, the movie cares about the kid because Joseph Gordon-Levitt likes the mom. It isn't even just there's an inherent sympathy to children, because the movie doesn't care that much about the other kids who get killed.
It's about the heterosexual
the movie cares
family
about
unit.
the like connection, and I think that one of the ways that you circumvent the weirdness of that is making it a little bit more direct. It's, if it has to be a kid relationship, maybe it's your kid. Maybe that's, as Aaron said, what if your kid was Mewtwo? Not what if a hot girl who you just met kid was Mewtwo. That's not quite as powerful, I think.
Not that wouldn't work on me, to be clear.
Absolutely. Right. That's the thing. I think that's like making it, and that's one of the strengths of doing like a Kid Blue, is the person type connect thing as well, is like, you are connected, you have a personal opinion on this. And I think that it's, in that situation, it's really easy to do the nobody beats the shit out of this person but me kind of thing.
Right.
You know, where like a protectiveness comes in from when the out group threatens the in group, even if you don't particularly like that person. So I think that there's a lot of stuff there that is actually pretty easy and just requires as buy-in, which is inherent to it working anyway. So that's not something that I always like, you know, I'm like, either this works or it doesn't, and that's okay. It's allowed to not work. And I want to bring up, this is essentially completely random, but it's an idea that I started thinking about earlier that I think could tie in really well, and I just want to bring it up so that it's in the mix. I had the visual of essentially this team of time travelers. They're doing like a post-mission. They have to like sit in a weird chair, and they have to have their memories filtered and sorted to be like, you've been messing with time travel. We need to make sure that you're only remembering the one thing, and that you're not like filling your brain with other timelines or whatever. And then when we started, and I was thinking like, oh, that's a really easy way to have the screenshots come in, where like a screenshot, even in a bored clinical way, like put up a screenshot and the person's like, memory, put up another screenshot, and they're like, memory, put up another screenshot, and they're like, I've never seen that before. And they're like, good. Because that's for the future. And then I think that ties in really well to the idea of making everybody a little psychic.
Yeah.
That's all. I just wanted to bring that in because I think it's fun, and I think that I'm really drawn to, as I think that I keep kind of dragging it back to figuring out what the majority of the gameplay is and what the team is doing and what they are, and then focusing a little more on the specifics. And I think that we have the beginning of a really good structure here. We've talked about a lot of different things, but I think that there are some pretty cool ideas that are all sort of like coalescing together.
Speaking of connecting ideas from an hour ago or whatever, you mentioned the sort of red string aspect of this game, and I'm now thinking about like there are pieces of this movie that are almost a little memento-y in like, we suddenly see the other kill and we're like, wait, how did that happen in this timeline? And then it connects it and stuff like that. Like, I'm imagining you're drawing a red string, you're drawing a board of stills, and then you don't have to go in order interpreting them. It's like, okay, that still over there, I think we three were in that scene. Let's hop in and find out what happens around that time.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. That connects it to this other scene. Let's draw the string. We haven't done that still yet. Let's hop in there and find out what happened there. And so we're sort of hopping around this map that we are drawing connections between by playing out scenes to give them meaning.
Yeah, I think that sounds really fun, and it could be a good sort of like, again, logistical stuff could be a great way to say how long your game is going to be.
How many stills do you put on the board?
Yeah, which is great.
And I think Aaron literally mentioned earlier, I think it was Aaron, about like, you know, having all these different points in the timeline and then like having to like shuffle or sort. I can't remember who said it, but like, yeah, that lets us very easily dole out. We've got these 10 defined points. Now let's figure out how they position and relate to each other by jumping into the point and then connecting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really cool. I think that we have a lot of cool stuff here, and we are sort of getting kind of towards the end of recording, and so I just wanted to ask Aaron if there's anything that you noted that you wanted to address, any ideas that have been pinging around that haven't felt, directly connected, so you haven't brought them up. Just kind of want to give you space to chat.
There's no opportunity to do eye drop drugs, is there?
Oh, right. I am so fascinated by that as a delivery mechanism. I guess it just looks cool, but it's one of those things where you almost expect there to be like thematic resonance. In some
like
way.
eyes
never shows up.
No, there's no thing of no characters ever like you can't see what's in front of you because of all the ecstasy you're dropping into your eyes or fucking whatever. Just kind of is what it is.
Kind
and
of
also,
like having telekinesis.
Yeah.
Right.
In the montage, we do see him do drugs in other ways. And so other ways of doing drugs do still exist. Why does the eye one exist? Why would you risk it? Doing drugs is risky enough if you're just putting them in your body. Eyes are very sensitive tissue. But we can put it in the game.
Science fiction. In science fiction, they do drugs weird.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe there's a mechanic where you have to go get an eyedropper of water, and every time you make a bad roll, you hurt yourself.
Get some Visine, everyone.
That's right.
This game is played with a corkboard, photographs, and a bottle of Visine.
Yes, absolutely.
Sounds like a good night.
Well, this has been fantastic. I feel like we're pretty much we've covered a lot of ground. We have some cool stuff to bring forward into the next episode. I think that we are pretty much good to go. Aaron, do you have any plugs or anywhere you'd like to direct people towards?
Just youtube.com/@aavoigt. That's where I do my videos. If you think Jess is cool, which you probably do statistically if you're listening to this, you should watch my video on Going Rogue and Andor. I think it's pretty neat.
It made me cry. It's maybe
video.
one of the most beautiful things that has ever been made about my work. Aaron, I cannot tell you how meaningful it was for me to experience it. And thank you. I just an opportunity to say thank you.
Well, I'm glad you liked it.
Speaking of, Jess, where can people find your stuff?
People can find my stuff at jumpgategames.itch.io. They can find me on social media as jessfrom.online, especially on Bluesky. You can, if you like Going Rogue and you like games with inevitable endings, and you maybe enjoy Aaron's video when you go watch it, which you're going to do because Aaron's stuff is great, you can still get it on Kickstarter in late backing for only so much longer. So go ahead, check out Galactic and Going Rogue. It also features Galactic by Riley Rethel, who made It's Been a Long Time Coming. So like truly this episode is full of things that if you liked them, you'll probably enjoy Going Rogue. You can find that and my other inevitable game, I Have the High Ground, about an inevitable showdown on my itch, on Kickstarter, etc.
Absolutely, and I have been Satah. You can find me on Bluesky at satahchips.gaygothvibes.online. You can find my work generally at gaygothvibes.online. The reason that we are focusing on time travel stuff right now is because we are at Haunted Table working real hard on the House Edge, which is our time loop fist mechanics. It's a fist triangle agency crossover that involves a time loop. It's really good. You can go get it on Patreon. There's a full playtest version on there if you sign up at Ghost tier for $3 or above, and we are shortly going to be crowdfunding and releasing it, and it is fantastic. It's really good and has a lot of I've just been thinking so much about time travel as we have been doing a time loop rogue light TTRPG. I had to make sure that I was getting the right consonant at the end of the rogue like thing, which shout out to pop filters. And
all the plosives.
I think that's
Frickers.
about it. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Cris, Viana for our logo and graphic design generally. Thank you to Nicky Flowers for the theme song. It's so good. This is the first time we've recorded since we got the theme song, and holy shit, it's such a banger. And that is it. Thank you for listening. This has been This Should Be a Game, a podcast about the moment where you say, this should be a game.
This should be a game.
Oh, this should be a game, I think. I mean, like, I think the problem I was running up against was I think the factions are a little bit one-sided. We have, Loopers, we have the Gatmen, but I don't know, I do like the idea of if we are trying to hold on, my cat is attacking my couch.
Yeah.
Scout, you could not.
Buddy.
Thank you.